Welcome to Beyond the Script, the podcast that talks about the spiritual side of entrepreneurship, intuition, identity, and of course, some everyday life moments. Some days it's business and other days it's life, because when you're creating with the divine, it's all connected. I'm your host, Nikki Lynn, intuitive writing and business mentor, mom, creator, and a deep believer that when intuition meets strategy, we get to create a life and business that feel like the highest version of us. So grab your notebook, take what resonates, leave what doesn't, and let's go beyond the script. Welcome to the first ever episode of Beyond the Script. Today we're going to talk about the spiritual side of entrepreneurship. Okay, what is it that is beyond the branding and beyond the strategy that makes people carry on and continue along this journey? So, when we think about entrepreneurship, a lot of the times we look at it as a way to be in charge of our own time or to be in charge of our own money or a way to generate wealth, right? We look at these things, a way to escape the 9 to 5 and like I said, be in control of your time, aka live life on your terms, right? It's often framed as a lifestyle choice, but the thing about entrepreneurship that is often overlooked and that is not necessarily taught in all of the courses, with the exception of a little mindset tweak, is the spiritual side of entrepreneurship. So, what does that even mean? When we look at the spiritual side of entrepreneurship, we think of things like identity work, intuition, moving through a higher calling, moving towards a higher calling, moving in a higher calling. One of those would be the right terminology. We look at it on the spiritual side, like as a process of becoming, because when we are in the spiritual side of entrepreneurship, there is a lot of identity shifts that go into it, right? If you are somebody who has left the 9 to 5 or has a desire to leave your 9 to 5 in order to build a business from scratch, well, there's a lot of identity shifts that are going to come. You have, for starters, you have the employee identity shift that needs to then switch to the self-employed identity shift, right? You go from the structure of asking for permission to do things, asking your boss to be able to do things, and then going into like you being in charge of everything. There's not always somebody to ask, right? And so that is just one layer of identity. Now, the other part of the spiritual assignment or the spiritual side, which is the part that is my favorite, is the intuitive piece, right? Understanding your intuition, learning how to listen to your intuitive guidance, but also learning how to decipher when it's intuition and when it's ego. And I'll get into the ego stuff on another episode, but in a nutshell, the ego's job is safety and or perceived safety, right? And so one of the perceived safeties of the ego could simply be something like a 9 to 5 is predictable. A 9 to 5 allows a predictable paycheck, right? Whereas entrepreneurship doesn't necessarily off the bat have a predictable paycheck, if ever. And it is something that is, can be perceived as a little bit more chaotic towards the ego. And so when we learn how to listen to the intuitive guidance, well, for starters, it feels uncomfortable because you're going through these identity shifts, right? But then you're also co-creating with the divine. You're co-creating with the universe. You're co-creating with God, right? And this is why building a business has a spiritual side to it. Because if there wasn't a spiritual calling when it comes to entrepreneurship, I want you to think about all of anybody who's listening and is on this path right now. Whether you are just starting or you've been at it for a few years, I want you to think about the different trouble experiences that you had on this journey, whether that be rejection, heartbreak, frustration, plenty of moments where giving up felt easier, plenty of moments you thought I should just go back to work because at least, Like I said, the perceived safety, at least I can, just do my little job and have, a steady paycheck and not have all this uncertainty and things like that, right? We experience these things in entrepreneurship. And so why would any sane person keep going? Why would any sane person being like, okay, yeah, that sounds crazy, but I'm gonna choose that path anyways? It's because at the bottom of it, your soul knows. Your soul has this desire because somewhere along the way, you can see the impact that you can make. Okay? You can see beyond the 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 goal of leaving your 9 to 5 or living life on your terms, right? Like those are all really great reasons, but it goes deeper than that, right? That's just kind of like the surface level, because what does living life on your own terms actually mean for you? What does it mean that you can do when you look at it that way? When you look at it that way, well, for some of you, that means more time with your children. For some of you, that means, maybe more time to give back to your community. For some of you, having more money means being able to help more people, right? For some of you, your business is what helps other people. Especially like my coaches, consultants, mentors out there, right? Your business is what helps other people. And so even though it provides a lifestyle that you desire, the thing of it is, on a spiritual level, you continue along the journey because deep down, it serves a purpose to your highest self. It leaves your mark here, right? And so, where we lose sight of the spiritual side of entrepreneurship is when we get so caught up in the quick wins, the strategy and the strategy hopping and blaming the strategy for not working. And it's the strategy part is always so interesting to me because, I'll hear people say like, well, I just need a better strategy. I just need a better strategy. That's not the case. You don't always need a better strategy. Sometimes what it is that you actually need is you need the intuitive guidance to be able to understand which strategy is meant for you, because all strategies work. DM strategies work, ad strategies work, organic marketing works, content creation, through like viral attraction marketing works. Like all of these different strategies work. But when you start treating your business like a to-do list and you start just strictly looking at like strategy and deadlines and stuff, and I'm not saying that all of this is not relevant to the business, because it is, but we're talking about the spiritual side. When you start looking at it like that, then yeah, that's when people get caught up in like loops of strategy hopping or chasing the latest trend or the latest formulas, right? And none of it sticks. None of it ends up sticking because you haven't checked in with yourself on a spiritual level. You haven't tapped into the spiritual side of entrepreneurship and used your intuition as your number one business partner. Your intuitive guidance is always going to be your number one business partner because the business assignment that you have is unique to you. Even if it's a similar business as somebody else, right? Even if you sell digital products that teach homemaking and somebody else sells digital products that teach homemaking, there is a certain differentiator between you and somebody else that makes your assignment unique to you, right? Somebody told me one time, like, hey, if you look at the bread aisle, like there's a bunch of different breads out there. Like there's hella breads out there. And at the same time, people still have a preference. People still prefer a certain type of bread over the other, down to the brand, not just like, oh, I prefer wheat over white, or I prefer, sourdough over wheat. Like some people are like, no, I prefer Sara Lee Sara Lee wheat over Alfaro, right? And so when it comes to you and your business, you have your differentiator through your unique assignment, but the unique assignment is accessed through your intuitive guidance. The strategy will work when they're in alignment with who you are, right? This is the intuition meets strategy side. Okay. If you bypass the spiritual side, you end up disconnecting from your inner knowing. You ignore your signals and you stay stuck in these identities that don't fit. Identity is the next piece of the spiritual side of entrepreneurship because, like I mentioned earlier in this episode, when you get into going from being an employee to being a business owner, there's already an identity shift there. There's an identity shift in the unpredictability of cash flow. There's a level of faith that you have to have in order to trust that you will have more than enough money in your business. That's a whole lot of faith for some of us. For some of us who did not, grow up in an abundance mindset or grow up with the idea that money and cash can just be created, we have to step into that identity. And oftentimes, what makes identities challenging is you have to step into the identity before you even have the proof of that identity, like being sustainable. You have to, I don't want to say kill off, but you do. You'll end up killing off these old identities to step into these new identities. And it's an uncomfortable process. That's why a lot of people don't want to discuss the spiritual side of entrepreneurship because it's not the flashy side. Anytime the spiritual side of entrepreneurship is discussed, it's usually in a way of manifestation. But when you're manifesting, what I don't see often is talking about how you still have to, yes, you can write down your manifestations and do the rituals and all of that, but then you still have to step in to the version of you that has that before you have that. And that can be overwhelming for some, right? That can be uncomfortable for some because it is uncomfortable. You've never been that person before. You don't, you don't know exactly what that person is and who they are, and you can see it, but you can't hold it and all of these things. And one of the last pieces that I'll say around the spiritual side of entrepreneurship is when you have an idea, a business idea, an offer idea, any idea that pops into your head to create. Entrepreneurship, you create something out of nothing. That in itself is a whole miracle. I'll just say it. It's a miracle, right? To have this thought, to have this idea, and to be able to turn it not only into something tangible, but something that helps others and something that brings you a cash flow. Okay? That is one of the most spiritual ways, one of the most spiritual things that it can get, because you have this thought come from who knows, your higher self, from God, the universe, the divine, whatever you believe in. You have this thought come, and then you go and you execute on it. And then you execute on it and you create something with your hands, with your mind, with your body, right? You create something and then you put it out into the world. And then people come and they're like, you know what? I need that. I actually need what you have. I've been looking for something like this. I, I need something like this for myself. This is going to help me do XYZ, right? And all of that is because you stepped in to the identity of the entrepreneur. You listened to your intuition tell you what to do. You created the thing, and now you're starting to leave your mark. All of that is a completely spiritual flow. All of that steps right into the spiritual side of entrepreneurship, right? Then you get into the marketing and the strategy and how to actually build it up and make it sustainable and things like that. And, even though there's strategy and sales and marketing are necessary and stuff involved, that still goes back to the identities, because then you have to keep stepping up and leveling into the identities of the person that can hold it. And so this is, well, for one, this is essentially what this podcast is about, is more on the spiritual side of things, not just crystals and affirmations and stuff like that that's slapped on top of strategy, but actually the inner work of leveling up as the entrepreneur, right? The remembering of why you're doing this and holding the vision, even when the vision, sometimes in the 3D feels uncertain or disconnected or whatever, like just having the right tools to be able to come back to your number one business partner, which is your intuition, and to be able to lead from that truth and follow the right strategies that are going to help you to be able to, sustain the vision and reach the vision and all of these good things. So, if you listen to this episode, first off, thank you. This is the first one. They will get smoother as I get better at this. But if you listen to this episode, for like I said, I want to thank you. If this landed with you, share it, reflect on it, use it as a reset point. If you're listening and you're like, dang, that sounds like me, I do need to work more on like the identity and the intuitive side, or I have been strategy hopping and nothing seems to stick. I want you to know, for starters, I've been there. That's why I have what I have now, but I've been in that exact position more times than one. And because of that, this is why I do the work that I do. And this is also why I have created the Business Vision Reset. And so what the Business Vision Reset is it's a guided meditation and journaling experience that's going to help you clear the noise and come back to what you're really here to do. Okay. This helps you get back into what your mission is, not just what everyone else is selling, not just what everybody else is, the newest trends and things like that, but what you're actually here to create and how that makes an impact and gets you to your business vision. So if that's something you're interested in, I am going to put it into the show notes and you can grab it there. And again, like I said, if any of this landed, please feel free to share it with others. Save it for later to come back to. I want to say again, thank you for tuning into the first episode, and go out there and reconnect with yourself and go build something great. I will talk to you all in the next episode.